Worst albums of the year, because I am, at heart, a hater. One thing with this video, this is a Japanese music channel, so this list is exclusively Japanese artists. It will not make the albums any better. Let's go! Starting at number 10, an album that, while there was definitely worse stuff than this, was undoubtedly the most disappointing album of the year for me, and I'm talking about Vaundy's Replica. This album was paired alongside one of the most baffling album rollouts I've ever seen in my life. This album had so many weird choices made, but I will highlight 6 of them. 1, there were technically 35 songs on this album, except only the first 15 is the actual album, and then the next 20 are a compilation of every single he released over the last 3 years. 2, this thing is bizarrely expensive for a mainstream Japanese pop album, likely because of this 2-disc approach. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but usually mainstream releases like this are a lot cheaper than 4,200 yen. 3rd weird choice, the lead single for this album was an arena rock noise pop song that sounds absolutely nothing like anything he's ever put out before and got a pretty mixed reception as well. 4th weird choice, the only other single released in the lead up to this album was actually part of the singles collection and not the actual album. 5th weird choice, one of the songs on this album was already on his last album, and the version here is just that one but with a worse vocal take. And the 6th of many weird decisions, there's an Ado song here. Vaundy produced it and did a self-cover for this album, which is bizarre because there's already a self-cover of it in the singles side. It's called Chainsaw Blood. Regardless, I really enjoyed a lot of Vaundy's recent singles. Odoriko is one of my favorite J-pop songs ever. Mabuto was really good. I also like Chainsaw Blood. I thought that he'd shown a lot of growth from his last album Strobo, and I figured he'd be able to deliver on his potential here. Unfortunately, despite all his potential and all this improvement, this is somehow worse than Strobo, because that single Zero that got the mixed reception is somehow the best song on the album. So many of these songs are just baffling. Like, they might have one amazing hook and then nothing else is going for them. Like Carnival, really good hook, the rest of it sucks. Jonetsu, fun hook, the rest of the song is nothing and the instrumental is horrendously uninspired. The title track, Replica, another amazing hook, features one of the most baffling vocal performances that I've ever heard in my life. There are multiple songs on this album, including the title track, where he sounds like he got kicked in the nuts right before he started singing. There's also Palace and Neo Japan, both of which opt to use Vaundy's style-hopping abilities to create some of the least interesting tracks possible in their chosen styles. Also, both of the self-covers on this are just terrible. As previously mentioned, Kaiju no Hana Uta Replica version is just the original Kaiju no Hana Uta, except the singing is worse. And this was already on Strobo, which is an album that came out 3 years ago. His backlight cover is worse, both because he tried to do too much instrumentally, and also because Vaundy is just not as good of a singer as Ado is. And again, Chainsaw Blood is already backlight Vaundy version. He doesn't need to do 2 of them. I really did have high hopes for this album. I wanted Vaundy to reach the potential that, like, it's really evident he has. I mean, this dude made Odoriko. That song is universally acclaimed. It's fantastic. It's kind of become one of the rare J-pop songs to make it through a wider Western audience through no anime or anything. He had the chance to really cement himself as a top echelon pop star, and instead he completely phoned it in. I was very disappointed by this record, and while, again, there's probably more than 9 records worse than this, there's none more disappointing to me. At number 9, an artist that's in a better place on this list than they were the last time they dropped, Mikazuki Bigwave with Escape. Bigwave is an artist that's sort of been in an identity crisis for a while now, where it feels like they don't really know where they want to go with their music. They've got some classics of the future funk genre, and their albums Sentimental and Romantic are both pretty good, but since 2021's Metropolis.exe, they have been sliding rapidly. I actually gave that album the worst album of 2021 because it was just a complete and utter disaster. Luckily, Escape is better. Thank God, because if Metropolis.exe came out this year, it still would have been my worst album. Mikazuki Bigwave is a folder on their computer of like 5 to 6 producer tags and sound effects, and they don't know how to make a song without repeating at least one of those every about 10 seconds or so. That was especially the case on Metropolis, where every song was loaded with the exact same twinkle sound effect 20 times over. One of the main things that makes Escape better is it does lighten up on that. Not a ton, but a little, and I'll take anything I can get at this point. While the future funk songs here are still sliding off the cliff, Bigwave does make a somewhat successful shift into Jersey Club on parts of it. Tracks like Stay Alive and Welcome to My New World are pretty fun. That's why I say it doesn't really feel like they know where to go. There were hints of this sound on Metropolis, they were just all bad. But now they're figuring it out, and as those club songs continue to get far better than the Future Funk ones, I'm hoping they're able to follow that in the future. Or just move away from the insanely annoying sound effects, but it's been 7 years and Bigwave has shown no interest in doing that, so I've given up. I just hope their next album doesn't end up on my worst albums of 2025. At number 8, it's Another Moon by Tsukuyomi, and I'm not sure if my dislike of this album comes from anything Tsukuyomi themselves are doing, or if it's just a sign of how unbelievably oversaturated their style is at this point. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Tsukuyomi are extremely blatant YOASOBI impersonators. They don't try to hide it. I did think their 2022 record Sing the Moon was one of the better attempts at ripping off YOASOBI though. Tracks like Mayday and Nightjar were still pretty solid, despite the obvious confines of just making the one YOASOBI template song over and over again. However, any of that potential has just sort of fallen apart by Another Moon, which just made me upset by how shamelessly it is YOASOBI. They're throwing all the same long-winded choruses at you, they've got a very similar sounding high-pitched singer, they love the anime aesthetic, there's all the same annoying last chorus key changes that YOASOBI does. The big problem is that, in attempting to do more with the YOASOBI format, they've just made it worse. YOASOBI kind of maxed out their style on Arrival with Yoru ni Kakeru, and that's about as far as you can take it. Every successive song in that style from them or Tsukuyomi or anyone else has just been a worse version of that song. And while Tsukuyomi is trying to add more layers to it in tracks like Gyakuten Geki, they don't actually break away from the formula in any way. Like, they're trying to sound unique and different from YOASOBI, but they're still only writing the one song that they're just playing again and again. And yet, despite all this, it is still better than the YOASOBI album from this year, which I will get to later. At number 7, an album that probably only I listened to, Chrome Season 1.5 by Bleecker Chrome. Have you ever wanted to hear two Japanese guys who can't sing attempt to rip off The Weeknd for 45 minutes? Cause if so, oh boy do I have the record for you. This whole thing is just consistently not good. There's not really a single good song on here, and the saving grace is that more often than not, it just ends up in really boring territory instead of like awful territory. I could sort of forgive a really boring album more than one that's like actively terrible. But despite that, like there are still a couple terrible tracks here. FYT has non-stop terrible melodies and one of the worst attempts at trap I've heard in a while. 2016 is one of the aforementioned bad impressions of The Weeknd, which is something that goes all the way to the vocals. He's trying to sound like The Weeknd, and he doesn't. Nani mo Shinakutai is trying to get like artsy and sad with it, with all the different vocal styles it uses, and it doesn't work at all either. But at the end of the day, most of this record is just boring. Run, Too Much, Matrix, Blessings, these are all just sludge that blend together in a soup, but it's a soup that instantly puts you into a coma. It's not a good record. This group has no sound of their own and is just trying to halfway rip popular styles. If you wanted to hear music by two guys who once listened to the Weeknd discography and went, I could probably do that, Bleecker Chrome. At number 6, the first of a couple takes in this video that will undoubtedly get me yelled at, Chai's self-titled album, Chai. Chai is a band that I have been recommended for a while, but I never really got around to listening to. With this new self-titled album, I figured I'd give them a shot, and what I got was an extremely boring pop album. I thought they were supposed to be like cool and kind of out there in terms of sound. This is generic as hell. There's not really any particular highs or lows on this album. There's not anything I can super specifically point to as to like, here's the reason why this album sucks. It's a 30-minute slog of AI-generated dance pop music. I guess if I had to pick one, Game is particularly egregious, with its awful vocals, incredibly lazy instrumental, and general complete lack of personality. And the rest of the songs aren't any better. They're all pretty similar and pretty consistent in being bad. This is just not at all enjoyable to me, and there's 100 other pop albums that came out this year that feel more inspired and that I could be listening to instead. Next up at number 5, an artist whose fanbase sent me a ton of slurs this year, so please don't do that again. Suisei Hoshimachi and her album Specter. This is coming from someone who likes her other project, Midnight Grand Orchestra. Their EP from a month ago, Starpeggio, was pretty fine. Her solo work, unfortunately, is not. I was iffy on 2021's Still Stellar, and it's just gotten worse on this album. I completely stand by what I said in my review of this earlier this year, which is that Suisei is not typically the problem with this album. A lot of the fault here lies on the producers who are giving her bad instrumentals. There's a couple songs here that are bland and generic. That's stuff like Template and My Happy Transmission. There's nothing much to them, and there's nothing interesting that really ever happens in the production. And then there's also a bunch of the other end where the songs are completely overcooked and a disaster in a different way. That's more apparent on the chaotic Soiri and the complete train crash True Girl Show. That latter one is probably one of the worst things I've heard all year, as its horrible production is actually matched by an equally terrible vocal performance from Suisei. It is Garbo. At least she's trying a more distinctive brand of J-pop. My main complaint with her last album was that it felt like an album of generic anime rock songs. None of them had any real flair or style to them. It was just something any singer could have done. And I mean, these songs do have flair, it's just not good flair. It's quite annoying most of the time, actually. This is bad, and I don't understand the people who will defend it with their lives, because this is just like orders of magnitude worse than Midnight Grand Orchestra. There's only 2 VTubers on this list, but at number 4 we get the other, Mori Calliope's Jigoku 6. This is actually the best thing Mori Calliope has ever put out, and it's still my 4th worst release of the year. The reason this one isn't as bad is because Universal, her label, is really trying to save her. Like, she as an artist has arguably gotten worse over time, but her label has decided to counteract this by hiring massive names like Hidefumi Kenmochi of Wednesday Campanella and TK to produce songs for this record. They got TK on this thing. The Unravel guy. The Ling Toshite Segore guy. I hope they paid him out the ass for this one. Where this differs from virtually every previous Mori Calliope effort is that there are genuine moments of musical competence here. Which granted, that gets a lot easier when you're hiring the hottest electronic producer in the country, but there are moments here. It's just, they don't often come from Mori herself. They're coming because her label called up TK and asked if he had any demos they could buy off him. I'm pretty sure even I could manage to make a decent song if you gave me a TK demo, and I'm terrible at music. Outside of that though, Mori Calliope is still not a good singer. A lot of these songs are competently produced, but that doesn't save them from still being bad. Black Sheep is an extremely basic J-rock chorus, and they decided to let Mori rap the verses, which we know how that goes. There's also You're Not Special, which is a totally fine instrumental, except Mori sounds like she's doing one of those English covers that you see on YouTube sometimes. Like, this doesn't feel like the original song. This feels like someone muted the original audio track and is doing like a translation over it. I've never heard anything like that before. It's so weird. I guess this EP is better than her last couple. It doesn't have rants about wokeness on it, so it's an improvement? For number 3, we move on to another rap release, Lyrical School's New World EP, which was second only to Vaundy in terms of the sheer disappointment that it gave me. Lyrical School was an idol girl group that, as recently as last year, was dropping pretty good music. Last year's LS was a fun idol pop album that I quite enjoyed. Unfortunately, in the year between that release and New World, Lyrical School underwent a complete identity shift, getting rid of every member except for one, and replacing them with a bunch of random guys. So Lyrical School has lost its identity as a girl group, an idol group, and to a certain extent a rap group, all in one go. This new iteration of Lyrical School feels like the single most corporate thing I've ever listened to. It's probably like McDonald's jingle, Lyrical School, stock music library, like in that order of corporateness. This group was created in a boardroom to feel as hip with the kids as possible, which makes it genuinely painful to listen to most of these tracks. This doesn't feel like an authentic, youthful rap group. This feels like the Japanese equivalent of those "how do you do, fellow kids" memes. This is called New World, right? Lyrical School wants to emphasize that this is a brand new group, which they set out to do straight from their first single of the same title. And this group is fresh. This group is creative. This group is new. That's why their debut song is a direct ripoff of Paranoid by Kanye West. I am not exaggerating or joking in any way. It is literally just Paranoid. That's the whole song. It's so blatant that I genuinely don't know how they got away with it. It's made even weirder by the fact that they're shoving 8 different new members onto a song where over half of it is just an instrumental or a chorus. So there's no time for the members to actually introduce themselves or show their skills, and there's multiple people here who get to say literally one line for the entire time, and then they just awkwardly stand in the background for the rest of the video. Like, take this twink. That's all he does. He never shows up again. What a great new addition to the group he is. Also, entirely unrelated to the song here, this is one of the worst promo photos I've ever seen in my life. They've got like 9 people in this group, and the room is so small that they've had to show 4 of them onto one bed. Anyways, New World is actually the best song on this EP, by a very large margin. I quite enjoy Paranoid by Kanye. I don't enjoy anything else here. Drive Me Crazy is an uninspired attempt at that retro synthwave sound that is not helped by whoever's doing the chorus being really, really bad at singing. Mada Mada Da is really annoying, both with the beat and the very repetitive vocals. And 1 Second Awesome Summer interpolates a song from when Lyrical School had any sort of cohesive identity, and instead opts to just leave these new members to butcher it. This is terrible. It's genuinely sad how far this group has fallen, and all the label execs behind this need to be shot out of a cannon. There's not really a word for this other than disgraceful. At number 2, it's Electro Swing from Hell, Fake Type's Fake Swing 2. I know Brad Taste in Music hates this album, and I just want to say that I hated this before he did. Unlike Brad, though, who said this was the worst album of the year, I do think that there's one worse. Part of that might have been caused by my expectations for this already being in the toilet. I never liked Fake Type in the first place. In fact, I've been a hater of them for years, so when this album was, for lack of better words, an affront to God, I wasn't very surprised. This album kind of baits you into thinking it'll be tolerable with the first 2 songs. The opener features Demon Dice, and yes, the Mori Calliope song is one of the best ones here. From there, though, it rapidly shoots itself off a cliff, and the middle bit is just a drag of awfulness. Tapamat Kyo, the group's singer, might genuinely be the worst vocalist of all time. He has the most annoying voice I've ever heard in my entire life. Just turn on the first 30 or 40 seconds of this album, you will immediately see what I mean. This album is constantly full throttle, and in certain contexts, that can be a good thing. If you're making a punk album, yeah. If you're making something on the short side, maybe like 15-20 minutes, go ahead. This is 30 minutes of breakneck-paced electro swing music. Personally, my preferred amount of breaks in electro swing is that for every 1 song I have to hear, I deserve a 200-year break because I should never have to hear any electro swing ever again. This is not merely a style that should be left in the past. This is a style that was actively created by the devil to cause as much pain as possible. And Fake Type are fucking masters at causing pain. Basically, every song has a key change as well, which not unlike my number 1. The only big takeaway from this album is that Tapamat Kyo needs to be banned from going within 100 feet of a microphone. I do not want to hear him attempt to rap ever again. Now, for some really quick honorable mentions, Heatwave by Superfly is one of the blandest J-pop records I've ever heard. Breakcore by Espeon. I love her work in Star Kids. She's got amazing vibes on Instagram. This is not a good album. Ado's cover album. Dear God, that Kikuo cover was atrocious. Yuragi's Here I Stand. Yuragi has completed their metamorphosis from good shoegaze band to extremely uninspired indie rock band. And finally, Code Geass by Asaki, which sounds like a watered down version of her album Killer in Neverland, an album that was actually good. Code Geass isn't. Finally, at number 1, I've teased at it multiple times this video, the only album so bad that I had to make a 12-minute video where half of it was just a rant about the band's problems, The Book 3 by YOASOBI. If you want to hear me really go in on that album, you can watch that, but I'll say here that this album has caused me so much pain this year. One of my least favorite songs on my least favorite album was the biggest song in Japan this year by a very large margin, which is made even worse by the fact that number 3, the original version of Kaiju no Hanauta, is a song I actually really like. And I'd have been perfectly content with number 2, Subtitle, or number 4, Kickback, at number 1 instead. But they never stood a chance, because Idol absolutely dominated everything this year. On a purely musical basis, I think the Fake Type album is ever so slightly worse. But they're so close together that I have no qualms giving YOASOBI the number 1 spot, for a variety of related reasons. Fake Type is at least trying to create art. Is the art good? Not at all, but they're definitely expressing themselves. Plus, whatever knock-on effect the Fake Type album has is probably going to be pretty minimal. It's a drop in the bucket. No one's listening to that and getting inspired from it. It's not going to have any real legacy. This will. This is barely art. YOASOBI is creating nothing of value and expressing nothing of interest. They have absolutely nothing to say on any part of this record outside of, please give us money to do your anime opening. And that is the single most scathing criticism I can ever give a piece of music. I love music, and music is art. Almost every musician ever, regardless of their motives, at least has something to say. They have a viewpoint, a preference, something that shines breaks through in their music and shows an aspect of themselves to the listener. YOASOBI does not. This is a purely corporate exercise, and it's art in the same way that, like, this can of Coke is art. Like, yeah, I guess technically the design is, but they weren't really thinking about that when they made it. They were thinking about how they could make the most money off of it. This is like the capitalist endpoint of music. There are 0 new songs on this album. Every song here was released as a single, and the most they could be bothered to add were 2 30-second interludes that just reuse parts of the instrumentals of other songs. At least Fake Type was interested in making an album. At least there were new songs released. I don't think YOASOBI actually wanted to put any effort into this. I think this was only released as an album because they knew it'd sell 100,000 copies no matter what. Because despite all my problems, despite my sadness at the complete disregard for music as something worth putting effort into, they'll sell millions. Idol, one of the songs on this record, is without a doubt one of the biggest Japanese hits of all time. There's a real chance it ends up as the best charting Japanese song of the entire decade. And yet, it's fundamentally the same product they've been selling you since their debut, Yoru ni Kakeru. It's the Coke can, but with a slightly different design. Yoru ni Kakeru sounded cool and fresh at the time, because at the time, the YOASOBI style was still new. But now we're 4 years on, and they're still making songs that sound completely identical to Yoru ni Kakeru. YOASOBI is a formula, and boy have they stuck with it. All the songs on this album are very similar to that formula in practically every regard. Similar melodies, similar key changes, similar songwriting, similar structure. YOASOBI isn't branching out at all, and they've never really tried to either. Their idea of branching out is just adding sound effects and having slightly busier production, like on Idol. And then other bands like Tsukuyomi from earlier see this non-stop success and the complete lack of effort being put in, and they go, well shit, I guess we'll just do the same thing. And you get countless bands all making identical music. None of it is really good or inspired in any way. They're all just chasing the same money with absolutely no expression or creativity whatsoever, and we're rapidly careening to the point where this style of music becomes completely unviable because of sheer oversaturation. Because this trend is going to die soon, and once it does, YOASOBI is going to need to adapt fast if they want any chance of survival. But with their sheer unwillingness to, do effort or make music, I can't really see that happening. Should I talk about the album now? I should probably do that. It's really bad. If you're somehow watching this video and you haven't, go listen to Yoru ni Kakeru. Then imagine 8 songs that are just that, but far worse. And there you go. You have the book 3. I won't go too far because, again, I've already done an in-depth review on this album where I drove myself insane listing off all its flaws. But, it's genuinely sad to listen to this. You could have AI generated half of these songs. I legitimately think if you went into an AI music generator and fed it every YOASOBI song, it could put out something indistinguishable for most of the songs on this album. Because YOASOBI is just doing the same patterns over and over again. Anything with basic pattern recognition could make a convincing YOASOBI knockoff because it's so easy to figure out what they're doing. Here's what I'm gonna do for you right now. I'm gonna play the first couple seconds of the first chorus of every song on this album. So watch that. They do that little vocals over silence into a big cymbal drop thing on literally every song. And on 7 out of the 8 of them, it's the exact same cymbal sound effect. And I didn't nitpick, I didn't skip around, I didn't use different parts. That's the start of the first chorus of every song on this album in order. And it's not just that, every YOASOBI song is like that. Every part of every song they've ever released has those similarities. Almost every song is a key change in the final chorus. Every song is a very similar long, windy chorus melody. Every song has a very similar thumping electronic kick drum beat. Every song has that exact same drop into the chorus. And it's not just this EP, it's everything they've released since their founding. YOASOBI is creatively bankrupt. They're more than creatively bankrupt. They're the fucking Lehman Brothers of creativity. They're the 2008 recession of creativity. This is, without a doubt, the worst album of the year. There are no other options. Thank you for watching. Sorry about the delay. It's because my best albums of the year video will be coming out tomorrow in order to counteract the damage to my reputation that will inevitably be caused by putting multiple VTubers and YOASOBI in my top 5. Thank you for watching such a long, ranty video. Again, best albums of 2023 tomorrow, same time. Tune in. Love ya. Bye.